Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Let's Talk podcast with me, John, and David, a.k.a. Shamrock Balls. And you guys know that we're huge fans of the 1989 film Batman, so it was only a matter of time before we ended up here at 1992's Batman Returns. And this is also going to be one of our Christmas films this year, because it's pretty much an alternate Christmas film. But hey, we're here to talk some Batman. And David, what do you want to talk about first when it comes to Batman Returns?
Yeah, well, we'll talk about the new book that was just released, Batman Resurrection. Okay, yeah. So, this was a book that I seen was advertised a couple of at the start of the year. Actually, John, I think it was myself that mentioned it to you, and I was very excited about this because it was supposed to be a transition between Batman '89 in the Returns, and I'm very excited. But it got to about 120, 130 pages into it, and it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be, so I stopped reading it.
Yeah, I did the same thing. And just to give you guys a peek behind the curtain, we were going to do an episode or a smaller episode on this entire book. We were going to crank through it, but it didn't necessarily work out because just like David, I couldn't really get into the book myself either. It was just, it never felt like the characters, because it is supposed to be a transition between 89 to Batman Returns. So you're hoping that fills some gaps, but you also hope that it kind of fits into the same tone of the Tim Burton universe that he created for those movies, because Batman Returns, we'll get into it a little bit more, definitely feels like a sequel to Batman 89. Reading the book, it just does not feel like it fits in that kind of world.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly how I felt as well. I just didn't... It just didn't grab me the way I wanted it to. I would have preferred if I had it picked up directly after the Joker died, whereas it picks up like 6 months later down the line, and he's got a new love interest, and they bring in a new villain, and it's focusing an awful lot on that new villain. Very little kind of information about how Gotham are accepting this new vigilante, and I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about it in this podcast, John, about Vicky Vale probably. And watching Batman Returns, you get the impression that Bruce hasn't been with anybody since Vicky until he gets with Selina Kyle. So the fact that this book brought in a new love interest, kind of as a stopgap in between Batman '89 and Batman Returns, it just didn't work for me.
No, that was my biggest flaw. Like, the main villain that they choose to go with in this book is it just doesn't feel like a villain that would be in this universe. And then they bring up characters that we're going to talk about, like Max Schreck, who's a big deal in this movie. And then, in your mind, because, we could picture these characters in our head, we're not picturing Christopher Walken's Max Schreck. It just doesn't feel like that, the way that it's written, that would be something that Christopher Walken would speak. And it's the same thing with, like, Alfred and Batman talking to each other. Like, I'm not picturing, like, Michael Keaton and Michael Gough, like how you would picture watching the movie. They just don't feel like they have that same camaraderie. Camaraderie. I don't know. I'm pronouncing that word wrong.
Camaraderie.
Camaraderie.
Yeah, camaraderie. Yeah, camaraderie. Yeah. So listen, I agree with you, because one of the things, look, I understand, and it's the same with sequels. Everybody in their own mind's eye has an idea what a follow-up should be to maybe a popular movie. When a popular movie is first released, people don't have expectations for it when a brand new movie's released. Okay. Now, we talked about it in our podcast with Batman, that there was a lot of comic book fans that weren't happy with a lot of things in that movie. But us, as just film goers, the normal general film going public, possibly children watching our first experience being Batman from 1989, we can forgive all that because we weren't growing up watching the comic, reading the comic books. Do you know what I mean? For me personally, it was my first experience with a big Batman movie. So the stuff that the comic book fans had an issue with, I didn't have a problem with, and I grew up with that, and I was fine. Like you said on our Batman podcast about the fact that you didn't realize yourself until like you started going on the internet and reading stories about how people were annoyed at some of the choices that were made in that movie. So it's the same with sequels. Everybody in their head has an idea maybe how a sequel should pan out, and I think that's why a lot of sequels are criticised a hell of a lot more, and sometimes unfairly so, than an original work, because an original work it is what it is, and it's the same with this book. Right, so this book has come out, and I had expectations for it. The bridge the gap between '89 and Batman Returns, but what I feel like what I got instead was a story which the author wanted to tell an original story of his own. And he's used the Batman 89 name and brand to package it and start to pepper it with stuff from 89 in there to justify it. And it starts off, as you said, as well, about you're not imagining Max Schreck, or you're not imagining Alfred Michael Gough or Michael Keaton. It's the same with at the very start when Batman has an interaction with Knox. So he writes Knox into this story at the very start, and Knox hasn't come back again. It's almost just like just a wee nod to Knox. I don't know where Knox has went. No, I'm 120 pages in. The book's about near 400 pages long. So I'm almost a third of the way in, and Knox hasn't come back into the story. But Batman has this big conversation with Knox as Batman, and it's just something I don't imagine Michael Keaton's Batman would ever do, would have this conversation with Alexander Knox like he did. Alexander Knox is cracking jokes, and I just don't see that. And then they're alluding to what happens in this movie. They're alluding to fires being lit in some of these buildings in Gotham, and we all know where that leads because Max Schreck is behind that, because the Penguin calls him out on it at the start of this film.
Which is great, and that's why it leads perfectly. It should have led perfectly into this film, and you bring up a good point because people have expectations for a sequel, and the expectations for this sequel were sky high coming off of Batman 89. It was a huge hit that year. I don't remember where it ranked on the final year-end box office, but obviously it's going to get greenlit for a sequel. I guess Warner Brothers had huge faith in Tim Burton and kind of gave him carte blanche to make the movie he wanted to make. And that's kind of where people got to look at Batman Returns as a lesser Batman film.
I was going to say, just before I go into that, when this book was released, the author announced that there was a follow-up to his book.
So before it gets released, you're pretty confident.
Well, the thing about that is that so the book doesn't go into Returns then. We've got to go sit through another book. So how many adventures did this Batman go through before he met the Penguin? So it kind of makes a mockery that Batman Returns is a sequel to 89 if they're going to write a whole slew of stories in between. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the other book is a sequel to Returns. Who knows? Anyway, yes, expectations for Batman Returns. Look, I remember, as what we discussed before, that Batman 1989 was one of my favorite films as a kid, and it's still one of my favorite films, and I was anticipating and couldn't wait for a sequel for this movie. And I remember all the talk at the time was that the villain was going to be the Penguin, and that was who people wanted in the movie.
Yeah, it's weird that they actually went the Penguin route, and it makes sense now looking back on it, because the Penguin at that point was mostly known for the 60s cartoon series where he's not the Penguin that's in this movie. This Penguin's very much a Tim Burton-esque Penguin. And then when you watch the new movie and the new Penguin show that just came out, very, very different from that. And he cast Danny DeVito. And, you would think that, okay, I could see why people wouldn't be too thrilled about it, or people were thrilled, you said, right? Is that what it was at the time? See, because I wasn't sure how people felt about Catwoman and Penguin being cast in this movie, because they do feel like very different types of characters. But when you watch the commentary track, the way Tim Burton talks about it is he wanted three weird kind of characters running around in Gotham City, almost animal-esque characters. Yeah,
well, my memories of the time, John, were, keep in mind, I was very young, so this movie came out, what was it, 91 or 92 this came out? 91? No, 92. So
I was actually just looking up the exact reason. June 19th, 1992 was the exact release.
Okay, so I was 10. I was approaching my 11th birthday that October. As far as I can remember, the thing was that up until then, we had one Batman movie which starred the Joker, and I think that at that particular stage, everybody loved the Joker. Everybody loved Nicholson's performance. The only other reference we had, if you weren't big into the comics, which we really weren't over here in Ireland, and to be honest, I can't even remember. Comic books were probably more predominant in America than they were over here, and but we knew the Penguin from the TV show, and the biggest villains in the TV show was the Joker, the Penguin, the Riddler, and Catwoman. And I think it was a natural progression that we all thought that the Penguin should be the one that's in the next movie. And not only that, I remember at the time there was talk of Danny DeVito playing the Penguin, and people getting very excited about that because we'd all known Danny DeVito from movies like Twins and Ruthless People. and everybody loved Danny DeVito. And it's funny because I did watch the making of again today, and Danny DeVito says himself he before he was even cast, he read about it himself in a newspaper that the Penguin was going to be the villain for Batman 2, and they're going to cast Danny DeVito. So he read it in the paper himself and thought, that's a good idea. And Tim Burton says himself that he was first choice, but the thing was, Tim Burton didn't know if he wanted to do a Batman 2. It was the studio that wanted Tim Burton back to direct Batman 2. And he was undecided. He felt as if he wanted to go a different direction. He didn't know. He felt as if he'd already done his Batman movie, and what else could he bring to the table? And the studio really wanted him, so they were the ones that said to him, well, why don't you make it as a Tim Burton movie? So that kind of gave him carte blanche in to kind of do whatever he wanted. But he wanted to make it about Catwoman. And it was the studio that says, well, we think that the Penguin is the second biggest villain in the Batman universe at that particular time anyway. So they came to a compromise that they would have Catwoman and the Penguin in the movie. So that's how that came about, that you would have two super villains up against Batman.
Huh. Okay. See, that's all stuff like I didn't realize. It's because I just remember the progression of it. It just felt like, oh, you go Batman 89, one villain. The next one you have two villains, and then they had two villains in the next movie. But we introduced a sidekick character. Then by the third movie, we have three villains, and we have another sidekick character. So it just felt like they were always trying to one up themselves. But what they did with this movie to get those two villains, it actually ends up honestly working out perfectly, because I don't think they ever take away from each other.
No, I think it's a great balance, and you're right. And I think, I think people were thinking at the time, because it's a sequel, Batman needs to go up against even more adversaries this time round. I mean, look, Jack Nicholson was a heavyweight back then, so Jack and him going head to head. I mean, as we talked about in the Batman podcast, people didn't want Michael Keaton, and he proved himself. He proved himself to be a brilliant Batman, and he was just right for that movie and just right for this universe that Tim Burton was creating. Michael Keaton was a well-known actor, but I think Batman made him more of a star, a bigger star. Wouldn't say superstar, but it definitely made him a bigger star. So to go up against a superstar like Jack Nicholson, and Jack Nicholson was the one that said to popular actors and actresses in Hollywood, it's okay to be in a Batman movie, it's okay to put on a funny costume, it's okay to play these ridiculous characters. So now you have like an A-lister like Danny DeVito say, first choice, do you want to play the Penguin? Yes. And apparently they were every actress in Hollywood was fighting over getting the part of Catwoman. And they originally went for Annette, what's her name? Annette Bening?
Annette Bening.
And she was cast as Catwoman, even though Sean Young returned and tried to get the parts.
We do need to bring this up, because this is a little bit strange, because as we talked about in our Batman 89 podcast, Sean Young was originally supposed to be Vicky Vale, then when she fell off a horse and broke her leg and couldn't do it. And she really wanted a Catwoman job. And from what I understand, she dressed up like Catwoman. And did she send pictures, or did she actually perform for Tim Burton?
Apparently, she burst into the producer's office when Michael Keaton was sitting there, jumped over the producer and said to Michael Keaton, I'm Catwoman. dressed as Catwoman.
Yeah. That's not how you go about getting a part. That's probably going to freak some people out.
Yeah, definitely. So she didn't get the part, and Annette Bening actually fell pregnant, so they had to recast again, and they offered it to Michelle Pfeiffer. And the funny thing is, I've heard that Michael Keaton used to date Michelle Pfeiffer.
Mm-hmm. That's actually true.
Yeah, and the talk was that at one stage she was considered for Vicky Vale, but because he had a relationship with her, he didn't want her in the original movie.
Huh. That would make sense. But because they do actually also have great chemistry, but I can understand why he wouldn't want an ex-girl. It's weird that he would still come around a couple years later and be like, I guess we can work professionally now.
Well, I think the talk was that his then wife, his then wife, has something to do with this. I don't know. His internet stuff. Yeah.
So, like, you're overseas with an ex in London, like, because this one, that's another thing we have to get into, is not filmed in London.
No, it's not. But it's not. So I just said about the characters as well. So you were saying there about how did they get to the Penguin and stuff like that, and Catwoman. So eventually they Michelle Pfeiffer got the role as Catwoman, and Tim Burton had also said that you're saying about these kind of animal-esque type of people in the movie. And I remember the tagline, like on the poster, was like the bat, the cat, and the penguin. What an amazing poster, by the way, of them three heads. Just.
And the black accent thing with just the white font, simple enough. Reminds me of the Goodfellas poster, but just perfect. Just like with 89, the perfect follow-up poster.
I love that poster, mate. But the thing was, Tim Burton says that the Penguin back then, he didn't have really much of a backstory, so he was mandated by the studio, like, we want the Penguin. He says he was just a funny-looking guy with a top hat, and he would wear like tuxedos and stuff. So he kind of dreamt up this backstory of this child that was born deformed, and his parents get rid of him, and he's raised by penguins and within this circus. And that was the backstory for Oswald Cobblepot. And it always kind of strikes me, John, that this was a penguin that we'd never seen before. He was grotesque. He was, to a certain extent, scary. I mean, very dark character. He's a child killer. Right, let's not forget that. He was murdering children.
And he couldn't be talked out of it.
No, very
like killing them, like, he kills him for bringing it up.
Yeah, he says, is it killing just sleeping children? Isn't that a little? No, it's a lot.
No, it's not.
It's a lot. But that's what I mean. So he very twisted character, and it kind of reminds me of what Nolan done with the Joker all them years later, whereas Jack Nicholson's Joker was very kind of vain and self-conscious about his looks, and very prim and proper and clean, nice combed hair, nice clean clothes, you know what I mean, proper, says, even though he was bleached white like that and stuff like that, but his makeup is perfect, right? And Nolan kind of just, in my opinion, he just flipped that on its head. He went, well, if Nicholson's Joker's here and he's very vain and he's wearing nice, clean, ironed clothes, and his makeup is perfect, we're going to go here and we're going to make him like with dirty, greasy hair and off-color green. We're going to make his makeup just all messy. He's not going to have a perfect smile. He's going to have, his smile's going to be crooked because it's a Glasgow smile carved into his face, and his clothes are dirty or they're filthy. So he went the opposite spectrum, and it kind of reminds me of what Tim Burton done with the Penguin. He took this comic book character, this, as I said, the only reference we basically have is Burgess Meredith in the TV series, who wore the penguin suits, the tuxedos, and they were nice, ironed and clean, and with the top hat. And we're going to make him grotesque. We're going to make him dirty. We're going to make him filthy. We're going to make people kind of revolted by this person. That's how it feels like to me.
Yeah, that's exactly how it feels, and it really does flip it all on its head. You're completely right about the joke. I never thought about that, how it just completely goes the opposite way. He doesn't even care about his clothes. He doesn't even have a brand of clothes. And the way that, Danny DeVito's played in this movie, he doesn't care about any of that kind of stuff. What he cares about is revenge, which makes sense because the way this movie starts, I kind of feel like, I thought about it, the way his character's set up is very similar how we kind of set up the Joker in the first movie, how we kind of keep him hidden, but we get just more of an origin story. And you can tell the movie's about the villains because we open on the Penguin's origin story about what happened to him as a child. And I love the opening to this movie and seeing Paul Rubin, and I forget the girl's name, but I'm not the world's biggest Pee-wee's Big Adventure fan. And Paul Rubin and that girl, their love interest in that movie, as Pee-wee's and whatever, I always forget the girl's name, but it's what? Cool to recast them.
I know her face, and I can't remember. I've seen her in loads of things. Very distinguished looking woman. So I was just going to say as well, because you brought up where it was filmed, touch on that. It's just, apparently they kept the sets up in Pinewood from the original movie because they thought themselves we're going to make a sequel at some stage. And they paid Pinewood millions of pounds, I think, or millions of dollars to keep the setup. And what actually happened was when Tim Burton was brought on board to kind of do his thing, he said himself in the making of that came out on the DVD back in 2005 that coming back, he didn't want to do the same thing all over again. And basically that any artist doesn't want to copy what they've already done. But since then, I've heard interviews as well with the likes of Daniel Waters, who wrote the screenplay, that Tim Burton didn't want to acknowledge the original movie whatsoever.
Well, I can see that, but he does acknowledge it pretty directly in the film itself. I guess only a few lines, but it does feel very different from the first movie while still feeling like it's in the same universe. It's very strange how he did that because none of the sets, except for like the Batcave, and even when they're inside Wayne Manor, yes, the exterior is the same, but they're not in the same locations except for the Batcave.
Well, even look, the Wayne Manor in the original movie, that was a real house. That was a real house in the original movie. It's in England. I think it's just outside of London. But they weren't going to film it. But as you say, they didn't film in London this time. Everything was filmed on a soundstage in LA in the summer of 1991. And they created a brand new Gotham City with movable buildings and movable walls, and I agree with you. This movie here it's just as stylized as the original movie, but whereas sometimes the original movie did feel like a soundstage, the difference with the original movie to me, John, is that the outside scenes were filmed outside, and in an exterior, whereas like the outside scenes in this movie are filmed on a soundstage, and you can kind of tell they're still inside. Yeah, it feels smaller.
100%. And Tim Burton talks about that in the commentary with the opening scene in the movie where, after we jump to the future, where, they're lighting the tree, the big tree lighting ceremony. And that's when the Red Triangle Gang, for the first time we see them. And he's like, we got motorcycles on the set and we just didn't have that much space. So that's like why they're going slow. And he's like, it was a much shrunk down version compared to what we were doing at Pinewood. It looks great, but he's like, we just didn't have the space like we did.
Well, even the likes of in the first movie when they go into the forest and they're driving the Batmobile through the forest. I mean, that's a real forest outside of London. They used Acton power plant as Axis Chemicals, so they did go to location shooting outside of Pinewood. That's why, a lot of ways, I think the first movie feels bigger in scale. But look, it's a conscious decision by Burton to go a different artistic direction, and I think it works well for this movie, and it serves the purpose of the story well. I do love how this movie looks. In my mind's eye, I think of it as that this is a few years down the line from the original movie, and Gotham has changed. The Joker is dead. The reign of terror is over. Businesses are coming back to Gotham. Max Schreck is part of that of that regeneration program. You can see at the start of the movie compared to the original, even though the original, the square of Gotham was thriving with people. It was full of pimps, and prostitutes, and crime, and homelessness. Whereas this one here, it looks like it's a thriving economy. Christmas is on the go. It looks like it's peacetime. And I love all that, how it starts at the start of this film. The only thing is, as you say, because it is a sequel, I mean, I'm glad that they didn't redesign the Batmobile, because the Batmobile is the best Batmobile, in my opinion. The only real returning characters we have in this film is Michael Keaton, Michael Gough, and Pat Hingle. I mean, everybody else is recast. The mayor's recast. There's no Harvey Dent. Billy D. Williams is nowhere to be seen. And when you even think about Pat Hingle's part in this movie, it's very, very small. He's hardly in it at all. So I did hear in a podcast recently, as I say, that for some strange reason, Tim Burton wanted to kind of get away from the original Batman. For many years, it did kind of bother me that didn't directly tie in, and I remember in the making of, there was a making of came out at the very time when this movie was released, and Tim Burton said that it's not a classic sequel in the sense that it picks up where the last one left off. Think of it as another episode. So when I watch this, I think of Gotham, as I said, it's a different type of city than it was a few years earlier under the Joker's reign, or Carl Grissom's reign of crime. It's a thriving city now, and maybe it's a different part of the city.
Yeah, that's very true. But the only thing that kind of makes it hard to kind of look past is like they open up, and I think that's supposed to be the same set of stairs that they're walking down in the first movie, like coming out of City Hall. That's the only thing I can ever think of. But yeah, and the cover the city in snow too kind of makes it harder for us to be like, oh, it looks very different. It's like, well, the snow explains that, and we didn't see exactly different part of the city. Shrek's department store. Axis Chemicals felt like was like outside of town, kind of like where where Wayne Manor is, very far outside of town. And this time we get to see we're in the sewers a lot. Never saw that in the first one. So you could just buy into it just being it still feels like Gotham City that in the first movie, just how it's just lit very similarly. But covering it in snow, you get that Christmas feel.
Oh yeah, 100%. And look, I say we'll go back to Dirk. Sorry, because I wanted to talk about a few of the wee characters before we moved on. And as you said about the opening of the movie, when you actually see, them showing Gotham City and those big tall skyscrapers, but because it is Christmas time and the snow's coming down, there's a bit of a white hue over the city. I mean, all that you can still tie into the original Batman with those big tall skyscrapers and some of them big spotlights stuff. Kind of reminds you of the animated series a bit as well.
Oh yeah, started the same year.
Oh, it's the same year. I wasn't sure if the animated series already was on.
I want to say it started around the exact same time, which took just huge inspirations from the Tim Burton universe and everything that they were doing. But I agree with you when you said that this is the best Batmobile, 100%. And they didn't make too many big changes. One big thing that they made a change on is that's most noticeable is like on the Batsuit. And the way Tim Burton described it is he wanted to make it look more automotive, the muscles, instead of being more natural.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that too, John, is to tie into how the city looks as well. Whereas the first movie, he had the abs and stuff like that. He looked more like a man bat. This one here, yeah, he's a wee bit more kind of, as you say, automated. He almost looks like one of the statues you see in Gotham. And look, I love the suit in the original movie. It suits that movie perfectly. I really do love it. But I do feel as if by this stage you've refined it a bit more. It fits Michael Keaton's face a lot more. I think the curl is absolutely beautiful compared to the original. The original has more of a kind of animalistic look about it, whereas this is, as I said, is refined and fits Keaton's face more. It's a beautiful suit. I still prefer the original, but this one, again, suits this movie perfectly.
Yeah, everything in the movie might just feel like a little bit of like a slight downgrade from the first one, but it kind of carves, and that's the thing, like you saying, like it feeling like its own episode. That's what Tim Burton was going for. It does do that. Like, you can watch this movie and you can feel like a contained Batman story. And that's why, like, you kind of forgive it for what happens next with Batman Forever. It's like, you know what? If you just look at it as a different episode, you can kind of buy into changing characters. Because when you watch this one, it still does kind of feel like a sequel to Batman 89, but not necessarily a sequel to Batman 89.
Yeah. Look, I've had 30 years for this movie to kind of like really grow on me. And, you have to just accept it for what it is to enjoy it, because there's things that do bother me. But on the whole, I enjoy it, and I do, and I think it progresses this universe, progresses Bruce Wayne's story. We don't need him to be brooding over his parents for 2 hours. He's got a new set of villains to fight, and to be honest with you, whereas the first movie is about high lawlessness Gotham is, and the crime on the streets and the mafia, this second one's more about internal corruption. And of course, we can get into that with Max Schreck, but I want to go back to what you said earlier, mate, about the start of the movie and the Penguin's origin.
Yeah, I did want to talk a little bit about that, because it's fascinating how, like, we don't see him. They never show him us. We just see, like, his parents are, like, disgusted with how he looks. The worst parents in the world. They decide to, like, they basically think they killed him. So they went over there, threw him over the bridge, and he ends up in the sewers where he's raised by penguins, which is very fortunate for him.
Yeah, that's right. And, just talking about this, because that was one of the things that when I watched the original Batman and seeing how the Joker was created, and I always remember, where did I see it? I can't even remember where I seen it, John, but where the penguin, that might have been in a trailer, or it might have been on the collector cards, because I had some of them, not as many as the original, but it was at the end when the penguin comes out of the water, and there's like the black stuff is coming out of his nose and his mouth. And I remember thinking, I wonder how he becomes the penguin. That's what I was thinking. I was like the Joker fell in a vat of acid. How does this guy become the Penguin? That's what I was thinking. And I remember kind of being a wee bit, because I always imagined that about it be some kind of dramatic shift. He was just a normal guy that was turned into the Penguin. That's what in my mind that I was thinking. And I was a wee bit disappointed about when I was a kid about how it happened, but it makes kind of sense that not everybody has to have this terrible accident to become a supervillain. This guy was just born for some reason was born this way, and his parents rejected him, and they threw him into the sewers, and he survives, and he's raised by the penguins. Did you notice as well when they were bringing the pram to throw it over the side of the river, they pass a couple with a white pram? There's a theory that was Bruce Wayne and his parents.
That would make, I've heard that theory, and that would honestly make a lot of sense just in the context of the film. So I like to believe that too.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of origins, then you have, and that's what I'm saying about just this film growing on me and expectations and stuff like that. I knew no different in 1992. Later years when I started reading the comics and I read about the origin of Catwoman, and I really like the idea that that Catwoman is this woman in Gotham, maybe a wee bit repressed, but she's a cat burglar. She's not psychotic. She knows how to handle herself. She's only interested in serving herself, and she's kind of sometimes caught between towing the line of being a good guy and a bad guy. Sometimes she'll help Batman, sometimes she won't, just to serve herself. But in this movie, Tim Burton has basically made her kind of go through a traumatic experience where, just like the Penguin, it's all about revenge. And one thing I noticed about the characters, so you have the three characters, the animal characters, which is Batman, Catwoman, and the Penguin, right? They're all outcasts. They're all kind of freaks in their own way. They're all been kind of repressed in their own kind of way. And they're all very lonely characters as well, with tragic backstories. Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is their other main villain in this movie, who's probably the worst of them all, which is probably on purpose, is Max Schreck, because there really is no redeeming quality about him compared to the other ones. Like, you're right, Selena Kyle, she's really floating that line. Even in this movie, you could argue that she's more good than bad, because what does she really do that's bad other than blow up? Like, I don't really think she does anything horrendous in this movie. Although, you brought it up, like she's just a cat burglar serving herself in the original story. In this one, she has the traumatic event that we don't see the Penguin have. She falls out the window and she's brought back to life essentially by being chewed by cats.
Yeah, that's right. And I totally agree. I've always been saying, now that I'm older and appreciate this movie a lot more than what I did when I was younger. I always liked the movie, but I appreciate it a lot more now. Is that the biggest villain of the whole piece is Max Schreck, and it is Christopher Walken, and that's what I mentioned earlier about it being more about internal villainy, internal corruption. You have Bruce Wayne, kind of this guy here, Max Schreck. He's wormed his way into society, and everybody thinks he's brilliant and everybody loves him. Look at him when he makes his speech; he forgets his speech, and he wants to blame Selena, and he just makes this nonsense up on the spot, and everybody thinks it's brilliant. About him saying, I wish I could just offer more than expensive baubles, and he says about it, I would just love to give his unconditional love and world peace wrapped in a big bow. I mean, what absolute dribble. And they all start cheering him for it. And but here's a guy here who is villainous, who is powerful, and his power has essentially corrupted him. He probably always was corrupted. And so Bruce is trying to fight him along with the mayor because they're not happy with his plans. And of course, he sees an opportunity in Oswald Cobblepot. So Oswald Cobblepot, his whole plan throughout this whole movie is just revenge. This whole story about him re-emerging and finding my parents and Gotham taking him in, be facilitated by Max Schreck, because he blackmails Schreck, because he knows what Schreck is. I mean, we see at the start, Schreck is a murderer. He cut his business partner up and flushed him down the toilet. Right? Meet Fred's hand.
Hey, I'm Fred's hand. I mean, you flushed it. I flaunt it.
I flaunt it. Yeah, that's a brilliant scene at the start. And so whereas the Penguin's blackmailing Schreck is slowly manipulating Oswald to get this power plant through for Chip. And it's his legacy. Nothing can come in between that. And so he's been starting to manipulate Oswald to get his way, so he can get rid of the mayor, so he can press through his plans. And obviously Bruce is on the side of the mayor because he knows He knows that Max is shady. And then in between all that, as you say, you have Catwoman, or Selena Kyle, who is this, secretary, not assistant. She is a very repressed single woman, probably in her 30s, who doesn't have a man in her life. You can tell that, she's trying to date that's just not working out for her. And she finds out this secret about the power plants sucking energy from Gotham and storing it instead of, supplying it with energy. And of course, Max tries to kill her. And so her whole idea is about revenge. Sorry, that's what I was going to say earlier. The Penguin's whole idea is about revenge. His whole plan at the start of the movie is to kill all the firstborn children. You see him in the Hall of Records writing down all the names. He has no inkling to go for mayor and run Gotham. He gets seduced by Shrek telling him that he should do it, and the power it's going to have, and the love he's getting from the Gothamites, and Poontang, unlimited Poontang.
Yeah, there's got to be some perks, I guess, for the job for him. Yeah, he clearly has no interest in doing that job. He's just he's in there like looking around, checking over his shoulder to make sure while he's writing down all these names, which I love that scene. He's dressed up like the Penguin that you've known before with, the monocle, the top hat. And it has one of my favorite lines about how, I was the number one son, but they treated me like number two.
Yeah, and I love, this is the only thing about this movie, as I say, there's things that bother me, and it's growing on me because, like, John, this is one of my, like, unofficial Christmas movies I watch nearly every year, and see if it's really cold outside or it's snowing or anything, I can put this movie on, I can just get lost in the world that Tim Burton has created again for this specific film. But the Gothamites in this film, they're absolute fools, aren't they? And they're played like that. They're played kind of like pantomime kind of citizens. And there's this one reporter. He's like I prefer to have Alexander Knox back, to be honest with you. He's got this wee moustache and he's always reporting on the Penguin. But I laugh when he says about when he goes into the graveyard, which I really love that scene. I love that scene where Bruce is kind of like he's patrolling the streets of Gotham and it's snowing in the Batmobile, and he says to isn't it? And then Alfred phones him, and I love how Alfred's doing the ironing. He's like, "Are you still out, sir?" And he's like, "Are you still worrying about this Penguin guy?" And he's like, "I think he knows who his parents is, but there's something else." And then when it cuts to the graveyard and the music, and you see him just hobbling down towards the tombstones, and when he comes out and he says, "My name's Oswald Cobblepot. A penguin's a bird that cannot fly, but I forgive them." And it goes on to the next scene, and it shows you like the newspaper. It says, "Penguin forgives parents," but it's the most sinister photograph of the Penguin you would ever see. He's like, in the front, it's really sinister.
You're supposed to be portraying him as this nice guy, but you're kind of misleading the public.
Oh yeah, exactly. And look, and that's the thing too, is that even we've talked about it over our last load of podcasts about movies having layers, and I talked because I went back and I've listened to our Batman podcast to get ready for this one, and I talked about reading between the lines and just kind of like not being spoon-fed everything. And I think there's a hell of a lot more layers in this movie than there is the original Batman, about character motivation, the looks that the characters give each other without saying words. And one of those is like even Bruce, when the Penguin emerges from the sewer and saves the mayor's baby to try and worm his way in, which is all set up by the Penguin and Max Shrek. Even Bruce, for a while, is taken in by him. Because here's a guy which he can kind of relate to, who lost his parents in a different set of circumstances. Alfred asks him, what's wrong? And he says, nothing. His parents. I hope he finds them. But then when the news reporter says, here he is seen with Max Shrek, you see kind of Bruce looking and starting to think, no, there's more to this. He's with Max Shrek because he knows what Max Shrek's like. And he's like, there's something weird going on here. And that's when he starts looking into him, the background of the Penguin. And that's when we start to see the newspaper articles about these children going missing at the circus.
And that's, I assume, is how all the people in his gang, the Red Triangle gang, right? Somehow he got the Red Triangle. That's a pretty big deal that they bring up early in the movie. The Red Triangle gang works for him. He's the leader of them. Because you were talking about the Christmas aspect of it a little bit. I wanted to touch on that. First of all, the movie came out in June, which I always find weird when a movie like this that's clearly set during Christmas time. It's got to be
Mhm.
weird walking into a theater, going to watch it like they had to with Die Hard and watching a movie, clearly a Christmas movie with all the snow, and then you're going in there and it's supposed to be a summer movie because Alfred, while they're doing that, always feel bad for poor Alfred setting up the tree by himself while Bruce is just hanging out.
Yeah, he's up the top of this 30-foot tree, and there's Bruce sitting watching television.
I mean, Bruce is like, I mean, it was I laughed a couple times because I'm just watching this movie for like every scene, and one of the most iconic scenes in the movie. It's beautifully shot. Is when like when Lieutenant Gordon says send the signal, and then of course like we get to see our first shot. The Danny Elfman score kicks in. We see the multiple bat signals, and it shines right in the room that he just happened to be sitting in the dark in. And he stands up all stoic, and I'm like,
yeah, that's iconic. And the thing is that you're right. That was the whole purpose of it. It's kind of trying to say that Bruce doesn't really have a life outside of Batman. That this is it. He just waits for that signal, and then he's off. But I think in this movie as well, John, we see more of Bruce being that kind of businessman that we don't really see in the first movie. Do you feel as if his character has progressed from the first movie?
The Bruce Wayne character, definitely. And I agree with the businessman. I always think of the scene where actually he goes on a business trip. He goes and sits with Max, and you get to see, like, I feel like this is a Michael Keaton thing. Like, they're across that ridiculously big table, and he throws it across the room to him. And he's like, I looked at it. And then Max Shrek being Max Shrek trying to just basically gaslight him and, like, Bruce, shame on you. Like, like,
yeah.
Even though Bruce knows what this guy is, he's trying to make him out to be the bad guy. Christopher Walken sometimes can't help himself to overact a little bit, but I love it.
No, I love him in this film, and that's the funny thing too is that Max Shrek, like, he isn't a character in the comics. He was created just for this movie, and for a movie that already has two supervillains in it, to bring a guy like Max Shrek in and cast a guy like Christopher Walken, who apparently Tim Burton was afraid of and didn't want to cast him
because of his experience with Jack Palance. He didn't want like another big actor or something like that.
I think the casting director said, "Yeah, what about Chris Walken for this part?" And he went, no. And she was like, why not? And apparently Tim Burton says, he scares me. And she says, her scares you. He's into like skeletons and all this darkness. but just like Jack Nicholson, Chris Walken just elevates it to another level. And as I say, I think he's got some really good lines in this film. Like when he says to that scene you're talking about, where he says to Bruce, you think you can go 15 rounds with Muhammad Shrek?
Muhammad Shrek.
But even later, this is so serious. And even later on, he says to the Penguin when after the scene where he turns the Batmobile into a ticking time bomb, and Batman gets away, and the Penguin says to Max Shrek, he says, he didn't even lose a limb, an eye, bladder control, and Max Shrek says, who cares? Never forget about him. He's finished. He says, tonight, he says, me and you, what do you call it? The Maxerade charity ball. The Maxerade charity ball instead of masquerade.
Yeah, again, he's saying all these things like he doesn't skip a beat. Like how ridiculous that sounds. Like that's something he's going to say normally is the masquerade charity ball. And Oswald's got to sit there and go, yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, listen, he elevates this character, and then because you cast a guy like Christopher Walken, he becomes the biggest villain in the whole piece. He's just manipulating, and he's villainous, and it makes me think, he killed his friend, his business partner, Fred Atkins. He probably killed his wife as well.
Probably, because where the hell is she? Well,
he mentions the chip when he says about Selina Kay, when Selina comes back and he thinks Selina's dead.
Oh, you late mother.
And he's going, yeah, he says, nothing ever surprises me anymore except your late mother. I think he says, God rest her soul, I think he says. But hey, you don't know.
You never do know. I wouldn't put it past him. The guy who's playing Chip, his son, is definitely doing a Christopher Walken impression too.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing too about Max Shrek. I mean, at the start when the Red Triangle gang are cause pandemonium at the lighting of the tree, it was all a ploy so the Penguin can kidnap Max. But they come in and they say, "We're here for the big guy." And I love how the mayor walks forward and goes, "What do you want?" And they knock him out. Not you, Shrek. And they put the guns and the knives to his face. I know the son walks forward and says, "You got to get through me first," and he'll go, "Woo!" And then he's like, "Go, Dad, save yourself." And he does. He runs off. What a scumbag. I mean, what father would let their son potentially be murdered to save themselves?
And then honestly, what's crazy about that is he runs off and he runs down the alley. And, you know, this is a physical media channel and you checked out the 4K Blu-ray for the first time. One thing I didn't notice till we got to the 4K Blu-rays, you could see where the freaking hatch is that he's going to drop down into when he's first running down the alley. I'm like, that's really noticeable. How convenient that he stepped on the perfect spot.
Yeah, the exact spot. And speaking of the 4K, I'm sure it's visible on other physical media, but I really looked at it last night when I was watching it again because I got a new 4K player, as you know, as I told you. Did you know that on the Hall of Records, where the Penguin was writing down the names, that there's two big statues of Elvis Presley's face on either side of it?
I didn't know that. I wouldn't have assumed that. I know that the movies do kind of, you know, I just wouldn't think to look for that because there's some pop culture references, and you know, I'm like, okay, but the movies themselves, both this and '89, you know, they don't feel like they're in any sort of time period.
Yeah, well, I think that was an in joke. I'm not sure who it was, who'd thought of it, but if you watch it again, it says Hall of Records, and there's two big statue faces of Elvis Presley either side. But as you say, yes, in Max Schreck's office, do you notice that there's pictures of Max Schreck standing, like photographs? He's with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sammy Davis Jr., and who's the other one? There's somebody else really famous as well. I can't think who it is. It may be Muhammad Ali or someone. He's standing beside Max Schreck, as if Max Schreck knows all these celebrities, which is funny because Arnie goes on to play Mr. Freeze in Batman and Robin.
There are some really funny connections when you think about that. Like Jack Nicholson and Danny DeVito are really close in real life, and they're both from Neptune, New Jersey, so they're actually from the same hometown. And they've been in other movies together before this. This is like, I think might have been like, they weren't in the same movie, but they've been in other movies together, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Terms of Endearment. So it's just funny that they go from Jack Nicholson and then Danny DeVito's ends up in this one. And there are all those like just little connections between the actors. And then like we talked about Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Keaton. So it's just those little conveniences.
Yeah, and maybe Jack put a word in for Danny DeVito. You don't know, or maybe Danny asked Jack, you know, what do you think? And he's went, go for it. But like I say, you know, like Marlon Brando playing Superman's father in Superman, that kind of was the idea of casting Jack Nicholson as the Joker. And the fact that Jack Nicholson, as I said on our Batman podcast, Batman wasn't the type of movies that Jack Nicholson done, but the fact that he said yes to play the Joker and the film became such a big hit. I mean, it was the movie of 1989, let's be honest, even though we had some great movies that year, done really well. But that kind of opened the door to say to serious actors, yes, you can play these parts. Mm-hmm. And you can get good reviews for them, and you can get paid a lot of money for them too. So the likes of like Danny DeVito, Michelle Pfeiffer, Chris Walken coming into these movies, that's what it done. So you were saying there as well about them mentioning pop culture, and because these feel like their own world. That is one of the things. I did listen to an interview with the writer. I think it was last year, and he there were several different writers in this movie. I think Sam Hamm, who helped write the original, he was brought back to write a couple of drafts, and he had a completely different story. And then that was kind of threw out the window. It was like, no, we need a fresh approach. And they brought Daniel Waters in, and he wrote he wrote the screenplay with Tim Burton. But then it brought another guy in, and I don't think he's credited in this movie. I can't even remember his name. He might be credited, John. I'm not sure. But the thing was, he done like a polish, and he polished up dialogue, and he added like pop culture references. And Daniel Waters apparently hated that because he realized, like you said, this is in its own world. Bruce Wayne mentioning Ted Bundy and Norman Bates, he hates that.
Yeah, it honestly will take me out of it because you notice, like, I watched this movie a lot when I was a kid. I probably watched this one as a child more than I watched Batman '89. I watched Batman Returns probably more, and all those references would always kind of ring my ear, like surprise me, because when you watch the movie, you know, you got like the microphones earlier in the movie, they all look like old 50s microphones, the clothes they're wearing. all the Art Deco set design. It all feels like unique. Then you have like the 80s police cars, but they don't have logos on them, so you don't really know what they are essentially. So everything met Shrek's department store has that like, again, that Art Deco look to it, but kind of feels similar with the logo to Axis Chemical. So it feels like its own world, but you don't think of it as in the regular world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Look, you know what? I've always said, and I said it in our last podcast, for me, Batman works best in a fantasy world. And I think that if the original is like a gothic kind of fantasy or gothic tale, this one here is more like a twisted fairy tale. And it is with it. It's like, you could almost say it's filmed in a snow globe, the outside words you can get in. And I totally agree with you. Look, it doesn't look, we talked about it in the Batman thing. There's certain stuff there. We grew up with it. Does that bother me? Not so much. What bothers me more is the stuff like the real kind of fantasy elements, like penguins with rockets on their backs. I just wish that wasn't in it. I've accepted it now. The most interesting parts of this movie for me, John, and it's funny because Tim Burton wanted to make a movie with Catwoman as the villain. My favorite parts of this movie are the scenes with Bruce and Selina, or Batman and Catwoman. They're I think the reason why I keep returning to this movie. I absolutely love them scenes with them two characters, and it's kind of, I always feel as if this movie is kind of like the Empire Strikes Back of Batman films, because whereas the original ended with the Joker's dead, Batman solved the riddle of who killed his parents, he got the girl, Gotham's safe, and he's going to be their protector. By the end of this movie, he's kind of like fell out with the police because the police thought that he killed the Ace Princess and they shot at him. And his whole outlook on Gotham's very cynical now compared to the original movie. I feel as if Batman is very cynical about Gotham in this movie compared to the original. And not only that, he lost the girl. He didn't get the girl. The villains are all gone, but he didn't get the girl. And his heart is longing for her. This love that he had, that he thought he could have had. And I think it almost feels like it's a defeat for Batman rather than a win. And I do know that there was a deleted scene. I don't know if they ever filmed it, but it is in the comic book adaptation where you see the car driving off at the end, and it cuts to the mayor and Commissioner Gordon, and one of them says to the other one, when the bat signal goes up into the sky, and one of them says to the other one, do you think he'll ever forgive us?
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that they actually have that in there, because it's true. And the way the cops turn on. I love that scene, by the way. I mean, it's funny because like Danny DeVito comes running out with the thing and just she falls to the ground and all the bats come out. I'm like, that's ridiculous, but it's really funny and it works perfectly for that, because then that's why the city turns on. I 100% agree with you. Everything that they do at Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Keaton, this movie, whether it's Batman and Catwoman or it's Selina Kyle and Bruce Wayne, I love every single aspect of that. I love how they don't know it's each other until like the one moment when they finally figure it out. That's my favorite scene in the movie, is when they go to the charity ball, and
yes,
they're the only two not wearing masks there, and they still don't realize, like, because they both, these are their costumes. Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle are their costumes. They're most comfortable as Catwoman and Batman. This is the costumes they put on for the costume party.
Yeah, 100%, exactly. And I love the relationship in this film, John. I mean, for her to go from, as I said, if you look at her apartment, how repressed she is in that apartment, with like the beams going through the apartment, everything's enclosed, and then of course she becomes Catwoman, and that gives her a wee bit more confidence to be who she wants to be, even though she's revenge on her mind. And then she meets Bruce, and they go to the. I love when, like, we'll just rewind. So the Penguin tries to blow up the Batmobile, and it doesn't work. But he wasn't going to blow it up. He was trying to crash the Batmobile with Batman in it and blame him on maybe running over a load of citizens and destroying Gotham.
That, to me, when I was younger, it was like always the most ridiculous scene, because he makes a small Batmobile for himself that he's driving. I'm like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, and those are the wee moments in this movie. I love the Penguin. I love Danny DeVito's portrayal. I love his lair. I don't even mind there being penguins there, but when you see things like that, it's like an arcade, and he's like moving this wee tiny kind of like fucking Batmobile. It's like, yeah, who has the time to go and make something like that when you're going to take control of the Batmobile and driving to run a few people over to kind of like, villainize Batman, you know what I mean? And all that's kind of ridiculous. Some of the one-liners are good, like when he's like, I forgot to mention my license has expired. Some of them are good.
You gotta admit, I played this stinking city like a harp from hell.
The thing is that when he's speaking to Alfred, and I actually really like Alfred in this movie as well. I think Alfred has some really good lines, and Alfred's kind of like, yes, we do have to repair the Batmobile. There is security to think of, and that's when he has his dig where he says, oh, there's security to think of? Who let Vicky Vale into the Batcave? I'm sitting there working, and I turn around, and there she is. Oh, hi, Vic, come on in.
Yeah, that's put in there specifically because people complained about Vicky Vale getting let in the Batcave. So that was like what I mean. Like Tim Burton, he had to make sure that line was in there, right? To make sure we go back to the first movie because that's the only reference to Vicky Vale.
Well, there's a second reference which I was going to mention because that's why I wanted to mention it. Because by the way, on that scene as well, is that I love how he says to Alfred, he's like, about you ready to go into the Batcave, and he's like, I'll take the stairs. And then Batman gets in like this, I can't remember what they're called. There's a name for them with the spikes and the clothes, the armor and the closes. There's a name for that. Those type of tombs. But anyway, by the time Bruce Wayne gets down and slides into the Batcave, like Alfred comes down the steps behind him, and I'm just like, well, why didn't Bruce just take the steps? Because that was quicker. He would have been down before Alfred.
It's not as cool.
It's not as cool. No, it's not. So yeah. So as I was saying, you're right, 100%. So what I was saying about their relationship. So he then meets up with Selena, and they have the date in front of that fire. Did you see the size of that fireplace?
My God. I mean, I love that scene too, but like that living room, it's the most like I'm like, first of all, the floor is beautiful. I'm so jealous of that.
Yeah, the size of the flames of the fire.
Oh my God. I mean, Alfred's taking care of that's why Alfred's the hidden, he really runs Wayne Manor well. Cause he put that like one person there working the entire time. That's one thing about the Batman, which I know you didn't really like. At least they showed other people working at Wayne Manor.
Yeah, that's right. And I know in the TV show they had Aunt May, was it? Was it Aunt May? I can't remember. There was an auntie that worked for Bruce as well in the television show. I can't remember her name. But I
believe that 90-year-old Alfred's walking around here. He's got this big fire. He's cleaning the Batcave. He's on that all day.
I was seeing him in the first one. He's got the old feather duster, dusting down the bad seat. Yeah. But yes, so they have the date, and then I love how she says to Bruce, girlfriend, and he's like, yeah, sure. And he's like, oh, you mean now? Oh, no. Had one, didn't work out. And then she's like, let me guess, he kept everything from her. And he was like, nope, told her everything. And she's like, really? And he's like, yep. And was she right? About that. And that's when he says about your duality. And he says, well, you're going to think of me as like some kind of Ted Bundy, Norman Bates type of person. I love that scene. And then she turns around and she says about it's the normal guys, the ones you can't trust, so-called sickos don't. At least they're committed. I love that dialogue back and forth, and it's the acting between them two is absolutely brilliant. But when they start kissing, and then she kind of like touches his side where she had hit him with the glove, and he feels pain, but then he goes up her arm, and there's the scar from the acid, and that's when they see that the Ice Princess has been kidnapped and agreeing, John. That's another great scene. I love how with the pain, where she's sitting. Did you notice she's in her tent and she's reading her lines and she's like, lights go on, I press the button. And then she's like, no. She's like, no. And you see her lifting her lines, and on the 4K, I could see there was literally just one line written on the page. She lifts it, looks at it and goes, oh no, I press the button, and then the lights come on. But
I mean, she plays that like such an airhead throughout her small character. She does it so well.
she's brilliant. But then when the Penguin comes in and says, she's like, "Oh, hello, can I help you?" And he's like, "Talent Scout." She's like, "Oh, well, you know, I just don't switch on Christmas trees. I sing as well." And he lifts out Batman's Batarang, and she's like, "Oh, what's that, a camera?" I've never laughed at this before. I always remember watching this when I was a kid on VHS, and my dad started laughing at this bit, and I kind of looked at him and was like, didn't think it was that funny. But see, now as an adult, I started laughing at this last night. How she says, "Is that a camera or something?" And the Penguin's like, "Yeah, say cheese." And she's like, "Cheese." And he's like, just throws it. I started laughing at that last night. She posed on cheese.
Fully commits to this ridiculously stupid character.
Yeah, it's just so good. And then, of course, that then leads on to what she says about setting Batman up. But later on, when he's repairing the Batmobile, as Alfred said, you know, you got to repair the Batmobile. He's down there, he's fixing the Batmobile, and he's like, are you going to this the charity? Or was it the Max Raid ball for the odious Max Shrek? And he's like, "Nope," and he rips it up, and then he's like, "Oh, Selina Kyle might be there," and then you just see Alfred like going. And that leads in obviously to the scene that you're talking about, which I think it's one of my favorite scenes, John, with the two of them. I think it's one of the very few. I think him and her in this movie have some, even though they're playing Bruce Wayne, Selina Kyle, Batman, Catwoman, you know, it's kind of ridiculous, like, you know, dressing up as the characters, but or the dressing up as these characters, but they take it so serious, and I think they do some really good acting off each other as these two characters. That is one of my favorite scenes when they're at the ball, and I love the song that's been in the background, "Face to Face" by Susie and the Banshees, and I love how they you know, how these two people are just so tired of the bullshit, and they're so tired of, as you say, wearing masks, wearing costumes, and they turn up to this ball not in costume, and they're the only ones not in costume because that is their costumes at this stage. Their costumes are Selina Kyle and Bruce Wayne, and I love how Max Shrek comes up and says, "Let me guess, trust fund, goody goody."
Always got to make a comment.
Yeah, but he says to him, "Oh, you almost made a monster of Oswald Cobblepot," and Max says, "You know, who cares who's more?" And I love how Bruce goes to him, "I do," and Max. But Max just goes, "Yawn."
Doesn't matter who's man. It does to me. Yawn.
Still invites her, but clearly that's just the thing about billionaires. They hate each other, but you know what? They got to still kiss each other's rings.
Yeah. But here's this real scary, serious guy, and Max, who, you know, he's a murderer. You know what I mean? He's corrupted, and his response to him is like, "Who cares who's mayor?" And Bruce is like, "I do," and his response is like a 13-year-old girl or boy. Yawn. Just starts and walks off. I think that's absolutely brilliant. But yeah, that scene, I love that scene when they find out who they are, and they're dancing.
Oh, that's the best. I love that, because then it immediately, like, they're like, "Do we start fighting?" Like, you know, like, because like this is what we were doing before, and like they're like upset, but like still kind of thrilled. I feel like.
Yeah, they don't know what to do. They're in total shock, and he says they're, you know, "Mum will go outside," and my initial thought was he's only after telling her earlier that, you know, you'd think I was a Ted Bundy, Norman Bates type of person. And he says, when she finds out he's Batman, he says, come on, we'll go outside." Nah, let's not go outside. But if they hadn't have moved, that's where the Penguin smashed through the bottom of the floor, and the two of them would have been killed.
Oh yeah, and that leads like right into the end and why they don't really get to talk about it, because now they both have to go to work, because now this is what gets into the third act of the movie of the Penguin executing his plan.
Yeah, and look, listen, it's built to this climax, and this is the thing. As much as I enjoy Batman Returns, it's a seasonal movie that I watch. I think that the film is really held up well. It looks beautiful. It looks so good. But plot-wise, compared to the original Batman, you know, we said the original Batman, the plot isn't anything special, but the Joker's plan was to draw the Batman out by holding the parade, promising Gotham money and gassing everybody. And I always think that the Joker's plan there was to just, if he gassed everybody, he would get Batman too.
Yeah,
But of course he thought if I gas his plan wasn't to try and gas Gotham and hope Batman saves him. No, his plan was, if I gas everybody, I'll get Batman as well. But Batman stole his balloons.
My balloons.
He stole my balloons.
Stole my balloons. Nobody told him he had one of those things. So yeah. But whereas the plan is, which I appreciate that they try to do something different. The whole plan of stealing the firstborns, okay. How it's executed with like that circus thing going round and them stealing the kids, it's all very kind of, silly or juvenile. And then the penguins with the rockets on their backs. I know.
Out of everything in this movie, and you already said it, that's the one thing that really bothers me. And it's unnecessary. Like, I get what you're saying, but it's like, I get it. They're supposed to be friends now with the real penguins. I get that you're like mind controlling them, but it's a step too far.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm trying to compare it to the original, because I think the original was a wee bit more kind of, even though it is in this fantasy world and you have to suspend your disbelief, it's a wee bit more believable that a madman like the Joker could fill a load of balloons full of that Smilex product and just try and murder hundreds of people, thousands of people, just to get Batman, because he knows that Batman is in his way to full kind of like control of Gotham. This is a problem. Not only that, a lot of it is about vanity for the Joker, and Batman's got one over on him on several occasions, and that's his plan. In my opinion, that's his plan. The original movie, it's just I'm just gonna fucking kill everybody, and I'll get him while I kill everybody else. We want to get one tree, we'll just cut down the whole forest, right? We don't know where the tree is, but we'll just cut down the whole forest, right? Whereas that kind of, I don't mind the kind of like maybe. He's going to take the children, but how it's just executed. But the saving grace for me is the interaction between Catwoman, Batman, and Max Schreck.
Oh, I love this finale between the three of them.
Yep.
This works out perfectly. This does wrap up the movie in a great way. But I'll let you go on a little bit, because there's one thing I want to point out once we get closer to it.
Yeah, hope I'm not talking too much. Let me know if I'm going on too much here.
No, you're setting it up perfect, because I do love this scene as well. I have there's a flaw in it, and I want to also talk about the Danny Elfman score for what happens to the Penguin.
Oh yeah, I love that. So yeah, but this is the saving grace for this movie for me, is that these three characters then come together towards the end in the Penguin's lair. We think the Penguin's been defeated now. Batman's knocked him out the window with the bats, and he's fell into the water from a great height. There's a lot of falling in these movies. A lot of people fall. Anyway, and
surprisingly,
what's that?
Surprising.
Yeah, and so and I love how, and I know there's going to be a lot of criticism, the fact that Batman takes his mask off.
Doesn't have the black under his eyes.
He doesn't, and I used to know me through, and I always think to myself, what they should have done was they should have had the black, and then when he goes like that, they should have just cut to show Shrek's face, and then cut back, so when he pulled it off, the black would disappear, so you wouldn't actually see that it wasn't black under the eyes. Do you know what I mean? That's what I probably would have done. But people say, why did he take his mask off? Max knows who he is. Now, I think, as I said before, he was sick of this character. He was sick of being Batman by this stage. He was very cynical about Gotham and Gothamites, how they warmed to this Penguin character as they did after everything that Batman has done for the city, and how kind of like they believed that he would have killed the Ice Princess, which I have to point out, when that guy shouts up, Batman, push the Ice Princess, he had to have been a plant.
Oh, yeah, because how did you think that? And I mean, isn't it a little too far-fetched to believe that all the bats shoot out of the tree? Like, doesn't this all seem so convenient? But like you said earlier in the podcast, these Gotham Knights, they're pretty freaking stupid.
Yeah, they are in this film, and I think that's why he took his mask off. Batman, Bruce Wayne is longing. I think by this stage he's longing for a normal life. You see it in the first movie where he's kind of like, where it's kind of Alfred's the one kind of saying to him, the whole premise for the original movie as well was, what if Bruce was mad, right? And he met a woman, and he started to go sane. How would he deal with being Batman, right? This guy, he was supposed to be conflicted about going out in the night and beating criminals, and staying with this woman and leading a normal life. That's why you see there's scenes in the original movie of him lying in bed with her, and he's looking at the clock. You know, he's not sleeping, he's looking, thinking I should be out there, right? Whereas this movie, it's almost like him himself. It's not Alfred telling him, it's him himself. His own body's telling him, you know what? There's this woman here who's lonely like you, who's lost herself. And then he finds out that she's Catwoman and probably has the same problems that he has. And you know that, you know, Batman got a lot of flack in the original movie for killing people. And of course, he killed the Joker indirectly. That doesn't solve the pain of him losing his parents, whether or not the Joker killed his parents or not, whether you want to believe that or agree with it. It doesn't solve the problem. And I like that in Batman Forever, how when Robin wants to take vengeance on Two-Face and Batman's trying to talk him out of it and says it's not the answer, and Robin's like, oh, it's okay for you but not for me, and he says your parents weren't killed by a maniac, and he says yes they were. He says but the pain doesn't go away, and you go out every night after night looking for another face and looking for another face and looking for another face. So Catwoman's whole kind of premise here is revenge against Max Schreck, and she's going to do it. She's going to kill Max. Batman sees this, stops her, says that's not the answer, and he kind of is going to give up being Batman because he identifies with this woman, and he's going to give it up all for her. He doesn't care if he takes his mask off. He's just taking it off, and he's trying to convince her, you know, do the right thing, turn this guy in, and then me and you'll go home, and we'll sort everything out. And I love, and you're saying about the score, I love this piece of score, John. This is probably my joint favourite scene, okay? I'll say joint favourite. And I love how at 1 minute you actually think to yourself, she's going to do it. I love how she says, you know, I would love to live with you and your castle would be just like a fairy tale. And he thinks, oh, she's coming around. And then she just scratches his face and she says,
I just couldn't live with myself. So don't pretend this is a happy ending.
in her mind, things have went too far. There's no turning back for her.
Yeah, it's perfect. And that's the thing why he pulls his mask off is he's like, I'm done too. Like, we could do this. We can move on. Like, you're me. Like, I found somebody who could relate to me on every level, not just one level. She's not in love with, you know, it's not just Bruce. It's not just Batman. It's both. Like, and I can see you're both too, but you're right. She's gone too far. And this is the guy who's pushed her to this point, and she's finally going to have the chance to get her revenge. And even Bruce, in that beautiful fantasy that she wants, is not going to happen unless she does this.
Yeah, and she's consumed with revenge. And it's funny, just you saying that, it just springs to my mind too, is that's why they had that brief conversation about Vicky, because Vicky couldn't get her head round. I mean, again, read between the lines, she couldn't get her head around what Bruce was doing, obviously. She obviously didn't want Bruce to do it no more. You know, she couldn't, as he said, she couldn't come to terms with it. Whereas this is a woman here who he can see in her and will understand him because it's in her as well. You know, that's why he says we're the same. We're the same, split down the middle. And I love that. But when he takes the mask off, I just love a couple of good lines here where you see kind of Max kind of looking. You know, he's like, what's going on here? And then he's like, Selina? And then she takes the mask off and there she is, crazy with her and all this. You know, Michelle Pfeiffer is my favourite character in this movie. She is so good. She is absolutely beautiful. And just, for me, over the years, as I said earlier, John, I've appreciated this movie more and more than what I did when I was younger. And she is the best thing about it. Christopher Walken's up there, but she's the best thing about it. But I love how Christopher Walken says, Selina Kyle, you're fired.
I know.
And Bruce Wayne. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh my God, am I fired? Like, I love that he's in this changeless layer, and he's still, no matter what, can't help himself and believes truly that he'll come out on top somehow.
That's the way he says it as well. He's like, Selina Kyle, you're fired. He's brilliant, and then he said, and then he's just dumbfounded. He's confused. Like I'm saying, he doesn't believe that. He's like, Bruce Wayne, what are you doing dressed as Batman? And I love how she says, "Cause he is Batman, you moron."
Like, really, you couldn't figure that out by now?
Yeah, exactly. He's like, wait, look, what are you doing dressed as Batman? But here, what do you think about this whole kind of mythical kind of thing that's built up here with her having 9 lives? Do you believe that's true? Does she have 9 lives, or is she just really lucky?
You know, this is one thing that always like kind of like bothered me, and then I kind of come to the conclusion that she does have 9 lives because she comes back to life from getting eaten by cats. So you kind of can buy into some ridiculous, and then of course it makes sense at the very end.
Yeah,
Save one
exactly.
life. I'm gonna save one for next summer.
Yeah, exactly. And she disappears, so she electrocutes with brilliant that it's set up. She has that electroshock
Taser.
thing. Taser, yeah. There didn't seem she names what it is, but yeah, it's effectively like a taser. She gets that from the villain at the start of the movie, from the Red Triangle guy, and then she electrocutes Max Shrek, and then you have the penguin coming out of the water. And I love the music.
My
he-
favorite piece of music in the movie is him coming out of the water. It's tragic, and the score fits it perfect.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, John, these are all tragic characters. You know, this is, as I've said a few times, I appreciate it more as the older I get, because it basically, I think the plot in this movie is a wee bit more, not complicated, but it's a wee bit more kind of, complicated is the wrong word, but it's a wee bit more, what would the word be? I mean, there's more to it than the original, okay? Because you have a load of different wee subplots going on all at the same time, right? Some of them kind of integrate and things like that. But that's not really what it's about, really. It's not really about that. You know, it's about these characters at the end of the day. That's what it's about. These are great character studies of all these characters and how they cross paths and how they are very similar. And the decisions that they've made and will make. Are you a good guy? Are you a bad guy? What decision are you going to make? You know, ultimately, we know that Max Shrek is really bad. We don't have much of a backstory for him. We just know he's a bad, corrupt guy. He represents the corrupted power of Gotham. But we also have the Penguin, who has been corrupted, is a serial killer, basically. And again, we have Selina Kyle, who's corrupted by the power of Gotham and is looking revenge, just like the Penguin's looking for revenge. And then you have Batman. You have Bruce Wayne, again, another tragic character who is supposed to be the light of Gotham, the good side of Gotham. So that's what I think that this movie is basically about. It's more about the actual characters than it is about the plot. And just speaking about the plot as well, is that this whole kind of the Penguin running for mayor was done in an episode of the 1960s TV show.
Oh, really? He's run for mayor before?
Yeah, and I knew that because I had seen it years ago when I was a kid. I had actually seen it, and they asked the writer, you know, I was on the podcast he was on last year, did you know this when you wrote it? And he says, I didn't. And he says, you just told me. And they were like, seriously? And he was like, honest to God, he says, I didn't know that this was in an episode of the 1960s TV show. And I've actually got the box set. I must watch it because I never watched that. I haven't watched that episode. I got to like series 3 and halfway through it and stopped. So it must be near towards the end of series 3. Yeah.
I guess that does make sense. It is tragic. Like, it's sad at the end, like watching him come in there and the score's playing, and you know, the black goose coming out of his mouth, and you know, then he collapses and they bring him in the water. And you brought it up earlier, and it clicked in how you said this is more of a fantasy film. I feel like the score kind of resembles that more compared to the first film.
Yeah, I think we had a discussion. I don't know if it was on our top scores episode, or maybe we were just chatting about it, whereas the differences between Batman and Batman Returns, and the main Batman theme to me in the original Batman is more bassy. I feel as if there's not as much bass booming in the Batman score in this movie. But I do love I do love the score from start to finish in this. It really is a fairy tale masterpiece, if that's the terms you want to put it in. And I love how when the Penguin's carriage falls down into the sewer, how it transitions into that kind of Batman theme when it comes on the screen. It's brilliant, but it's not as booming as the original. But it is a lot more Elfman-esque. You can really, I mean, Danny Elfman, what he is synonymous for in his movie scores over the years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of whimsical, kind of winter-esque kind of, you know, fairy tale type of music that we heard in Edward Scissorhands. I mean, you can hear it all the way through this score, and it's a masterpiece of a score. It really is. I love it, and I love the original more, but this is really, really, really good. And yes, Nick, I have the score, and I've had it since I was a teenager. And I mean, like, there's almost music played throughout this whole movie. I mean, it's a really long score, but I think from when the Penguin when Batman does the old CD thing and plays the voice back to the Gothamites, and they start throwing vegetables at the Penguin, and he's like, "Oh, bro, someone always brings vegetables to his speech." The music starts there, and it doesn't end. I think there's music from there right to the end of the movie. It doesn't stop, and it's, there's highs and there's lows, and as I say, the music when the Penguin is being dragged down into his pool by the Keen Penguins, and I love as well about this, like, this kind of grim gothic kind of tone and atmosphere that Tim Burton brought to these Batman movies, was like seeing the Joker's dead corpse flattened into the broken pavements in Gotham at the bottom of Gotham Cathedral. Then you see Max Schreck, you see his corpse just burned, a charred, burned corpse with the white hair sticking up like Don King, and then you see the Penguin kind of slowly sinking, into the sewer. But then my joint favorite scene is the next scene after that, when Bruce is driving through Gotham and it's quiet and it's nighttime and it's snowing, and he thinks he sees Selina. And I love that, how he walks down into the alleyway, John, and you see, like, the smoke and the steam just dispersing, and there's just the cat, and he lifts the cat and brings it back, and you can just feel the sadness, as you said. You can just feel the sadness that Bruce is actually feeling at that moment, hoping that this woman is alive and still out there and that he can find her. And I love how then Alfred says, "Come that way, Mr. Wayne. Merry Christmas." And then he says about goodwill to all men and women, and then it just pans up and shows the city skyline right at the end, which kind of mirrors the end of the original movie with Batman up there. Instead we have Catwoman.
And this time, that's not Michelle Pfeiffer at the very end, actually, who did that. And I think the whole scene was a reshoot or something, or an after they kind of put it at the end.
Yeah, that's right. Apparently, it didn't have her up there at the end, and it was Tim Burton thought, or it was mandated by the studio, or Tim Burton thought that wouldn't it be great to have her up there at the end to kind of give this mystique that she did have these name knives, because somebody had pointed out, don't know who it was. Do you notice that there's nowhere for her to stand? She just comes up in the frame, and is it a person? I did hear that they originally used like a mannequin or like a robot type thing, and then it didn't look good, so they replaced it with a stunt woman.
Yeah, that's what they did. It's a stunt woman. They didn't have Michelle Pfeiffer back to do it because, again, they were done shooting, and like that was kind of, and that kind of confirms the 9 Lives thing. But if they ended it like with them saying goodbye in a more somber note, I think I would have been okay with that too, instead of them kicking into the Batman theme at the very end and trying, I get it, to send people home happy.
Well, it's funny you should say it, and I remember going to the cinema to watch this movie. This was the first Batman movie I seen in the cinema, and I was so excited to go and see it, and I was too young to go and see the original, as I said on our Batman podcast. So I tortured my parents kind of go and see this, and my brother originally was going to bring me, my younger brother, but he was also bringing his girlfriends, 2 brothers, and I knew like the youngest brother was like only like 6, and I knew he's not going to get in. And when we got there, right enough, they stopped us and says, "What age is he?" He's too young. So my brother brought us in to see Problem Child 2 instead, which I'd already seen, and I was raging. And because my heart was set on going to see Batman Returns, and I got home and I was raging, and I went on at my dad for ages. Want to go see Batman? Want to see Batman Returns? Want to see Batman Returns? And eventually, our local cinema had stopped showing it. He looked to see where it was showing. I think he looked in the newspaper. There was the cinema over in the other side of the city was showing it. It was the last day, and it was a smaller cinema. It was the last day of showing it, and he brought me, my wee brother, and one of my other brothers went to watch it. And I was so excited. I still remember sitting there watching it, mate. And but at the end, when Catwoman came up as a 10-year-old, I was so excited because I was like, "Oh, she's not dead. we're going to get more Batman movies. She's coming back, right? But I did remember leaving the cinema with this kind of like underwhelming kind of feeling, this disappointed kind of feeling. And it took a long while for me to realize what those feelings were, because I was only 10. It was depressing because this movie, it really does end on a real depressing note.
Mm-hmm. Nobody wins. It's not a happy note.
No, and that's why in recent times, I'm like, this is the Empire Strikes Back of Batman movies.
Mm-hmm. It is the only one to not end on a happy note when you think about it. And you know what? Honestly, it's the perfect way to conclude the podcast, because this does end the Tim Burton universe of Batman movies. It didn't do as well as the first one. And, big thing about Batman movies, what Warner Brothers and McDonald's wanted to do was sell toys. And it's a little hard to sell a movie if it doesn't end on a real happy note, and it's dark and these characters are ugly looking and scary looking, and the whole movie's kind of blacks, grays, and whites. And, Warner Brothers was like, whoa, we might have gone too far with this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been a lot of reflection on this movie over the years because of the direction the movie went and the direction that the franchise went. I mean, ultimately, this was the beginning of the end. You can blame this movie for it, or you can blame, Batman and Robin or Batman Forever. But Daniel Waters did say that there was no kind of direction from the studio, like, you should go this way, or you should go that way. He says or think about toy tie-ins or franchise rights. He says there was nobody told us anything. And Tim Burton says he did sit down and have a meeting with some of the toy companies, and they were like, well, what's the characters and what do they look like? And he said, we hadn't designed them yet. But he says there was more emphasis of this going the franchise route than there was the original movie. And there was talk maybe of Robin being in it, and they thought, like, we've already got too many characters, we can do that in later movies. But yeah, unfortunately, when parents brought their kids to see this movie, because you did have, as I said earlier, a grotesque penguin who had black goo coming out of his mouth, some of the parents kind of complained that it was a bit too dark, and there was an awful lot of sexual innuendo as well to do with the penguin and Catwoman and Batman and things like that. So I think that a lot of the backers of this movie's, Warner Brothers had to go a later direction, a later tone. And it's really funny because Tim Burton had no enthusiasm to do a second Batman, but once he'd made this one, he wanted to do another. And he even then had a meeting with Warner Brothers, and they kind of said, Tim, do you want to do something a wee bit smaller? And he kind of went, what? No, you still want me to do another one, do you? And they went, no, it's not that. It's just, maybe you should do something smaller. And he says he got the message. That's when he got the message. It was like, they don't want me to do another one. Mm-hmm.
And Michael Keaton, ever the loyalist to Tim Burton. He doesn't come back, I don't come back, which I always love that. And Michael Keaton, because he could have been a bigger star, and he really falls off after this movie. And it's like, why didn't he come back? And it's like, I've always felt like Michael Keaton is one of those actors. He was always like right on the cusp of being like one of the biggest actors of all time, but he'd always like make a big movie and then he would disappear for a while.
Well, the funny thing there, that there's what we were just talking about there about Batman going in a different direction. One thing that I can say is that, I think that this is a Batman movie that nobody expected. This is a Batman movie that I don't think we hadn't seen before. We'd seen the original, that was unique in itself at the time. This went in a different direction, but very unique for the time. And I don't think we've seen anything like this since. I think that when the Nolan movies came along, that the likes of the Burton movies were kind of looked down upon. But I'm getting a feeling now that the Nolan universe is settled down. It's been 12 years since The Dark Knight Rises, and as you say, we have the Batman, there's the Penguin TV series, there's all these Marvel films that have come out, there's the Batman 2's coming out. I think there's a lot of people going back and reevaluating Batman Returns and are reevaluating it as one of the better Batman movies because it is unique, because of its quirkiness, because of its the risks it took, and the fact that it has held up, the fact that it looks really good and there's really solid performances in it. Your point to Michael Keaton, I remember actually reading back in the mid-90s that he wasn't returning for the next Batman movie, and they actually offered him $30 million to play Batman, and he turned it down.
I just always have felt like, and that's why Michael Keaton is one of my favorite celebrities, is that he's just a regular guy. Every time I see him in interviews, he just always comes off as like not somebody who's like he's like in the Hollywood system, but he's always kind of felt like he'll do his own thing. He doesn't need to be, money's not everything to him, and he probably, because Tim Burton says in the commentary for this movie that the thing that attracted him and Michael Keaton coming back was to play around with new people. And that's probably why when you said earlier, you know, they didn't bring back many people. For them, it was a big deal just to play with new characters. And that's why they did want to do another one. But like you said, Warner Brothers didn't really have interest in Tim Burton.
No, they didn't, because they seen the dollar signs. I said they wanted it to be a franchise. And if you're getting the likes of McDonald's saying that, you know, we're not going to back Batman 3 if you continue to go down this path, then they're going to, you know, they're going to maybe toe that line a wee bit. And look, maybe we'll do Batman Forever one day, John, but, you know, again, Batman Forever is one of them ones that I've over the years grown to appreciate. I remember seeing it in the cinema. I was so disappointed when I left. I wasn't disappointed with Batman Returns. I just felt underwhelmed. But I still liked it when I left the cinema with Batman Returns. I still liked it. I just didn't like it as much as 89 at the time, and I still don't. Whereas Batman Forever, I was totally disappointed with. And that's the direction they kind of went with that. I think that, if I can remember correctly, Michael Keaton didn't come back. Yes, of course, because Tim Burton, he wouldn't be working with Tim, but I think he had also read the script and didn't like the really light tone they were going for. And I'm near certain that Michael Keaton wanted to do like a Batman Year One type of movie. And I think for a way Joel Schumacher was interested in doing that. They kind of doing a prequel, going back to the roots, kind of what they've done with Batman Begins. That's what Keaton wanted to do as a third movie, like a prequel to show how he became Batman. And they weren't interested in that. They wanted to go down the road of bringing in, you know, look, let's be honest, you know, I think at the time, for me, Jim Carrey was perfect for the Riddler. I still like Jim Carrey as the Riddler, but he was Flavor of the Month. Nicole Kidman, Flavor of the Month. Tommy Lee Jones, Flavor of the Month. I think he was coming off The Fugitive and just won an Oscar. Val Kilmer, although I really like Val Kilmer's Bruce Wayne and Batman, but yeah, he was hot at the time, and it was almost like I just feel as if too much studio interference with that one. And Tommy Lee Jones is one of the worst Batman villains that I've ever seen.
That's horrible. It is horrible. Now, we'll get to Batman Forever. I would like to do that with you one day, because Batman Forever is a soft spot film for me, because that's the first Batman movie I ever saw, just because of my age. So I always kind of had a soft spot for Batman Forever. You know, obviously, I would then go back and realize, oh, these movies are way better than Batman Forever. But I always kind of forgave certain things in Batman Forever, despite the fact Tommy Lee Jones is horrible in it. I do like Jim Carrey as the Riddler. Do kind of like some of the choices they make with the world in that. My biggest problem is if they would have just not brought in Alfred and Gordon and had the same actors. That's the big thing. It's like, so I'm supposed to believe this is in the same universe because of this.
Yeah. Look, I remember as well, John, when I left the cinema after watching that movie, 95, I remember walking home from the cinema and going like, one specific problem I had was Harvey Dent. Dent. I was going, I was sitting going, I'm near certain he's in the first movie. Because I didn't know who Harvey Dent was at that stage. I didn't know who Two-Face was, because I wasn't into the comics at that age. All I knew was Batman and Batman Returns. And I remember I haven't watched There Is a Batman on the Way. And I was like, I'm near certain he's in the first movie. And he was black. And I went home and I put my VHS in and started watching it. I went, there he is. And I was like, why did they change him to Tommy Lee Jones? And I remember being so disappointed with that movie. The later tone, you know, maybe I was a wee bit disappointed that I didn't see Keaton back. And no doubt about it, that is a sequel to Batman Returns. I mean, there's references to Batman Returns in Batman Forever. And there's references to Batman 1989 in Batman Forever. It's only in recent times with the multiverse and the multi-universe that we're all kind of accustomed to now that we can put it in a box and say, no, Schumacher's Batman's here and Burton's Batman's here, and they're separate universes. But like you say, that wasn't the intention. And that is why we have Michael Gough. That is why we have Pat Hingle in the movies. And not only about Pat Hingle too. His characterization of Commissioner Gordon, and I'm not blaming him, it's the writers, got more and more ridiculous as the movies went on, especially in Batman and Robin.
I'm sure he gave up by the time they got to the fourth film, and he sold that as a paycheck because, his cat. I hate him in Batman and Robin. A little less in Batman Forever, but I mean, Batman and Robin to me, that'll always be the bottom because, and I understand, I get what they're going for. I completely get it. You don't need to explain it to me. I get it's supposed to sell toys. It's a kid's movie. It's supposed to be a live action version of the '60s show. I hate it. I absolutely despise Batman and Robin. I really do.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I'm thinking about it. It's been a few years since I've watched Forever, and I'm just laughing. Remember when Nicole Kidman puts on the bat signal to draw Batman in, and so she can meet up with Batman, and it's supposed to be the top. Is it not supposed to be the top of the police headquarters? But he busts onto the roof through the door, and he's wearing his pajamas. And he's like, "What's going on here?" He's wearing his pajamas.
His dress, it was that busy. Like, are you kidding me?
He seen the signal, just jumped out of bed and got in his car and drove over, unless he sleeps in the police headquarters. But the other bit I was laughing at is, and it's been years since I've watched Batman and Robin, is when he turns around, when I think Poison Ivy gives him like the love potion or something, and he's starting there like going, "Oh, oh."
I know, you can't speak, and oh my god, it's so ridiculous. But I think we covered everything here on Batman Returns. Wouldn't you say, David?
Yeah, listen, I think we covered an awful lot. You know me, John. I could talk forever, Batman forever. I could talk a lot about Batman Returns. I could say a lot more, and I hope I didn't waffle on too much.
No, I think we got everything, and we go from one sequel. We're going to be talking about another sequel the next time here on the channel. Would you like to tell them what it is? Because I know it's one of your personal favorites.
Yeah, I haven't done too many sequels, and I think only our second sequel we've done. But yeah, we're going to be going into a Temple of Doom for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which, as a matter of fact, is actually a prequel.
It is a prequel. That's 100% true. That's one thing about the Indiana Jones movies. It goes original, prequel, and then a sequel to the original, essentially. But Temple, which is a ballsy move. We'll get into Temple of Doom next time. I just know that this is your favorite Indiana Jones film.
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about it. I'm hoping that I have a feeling it's going to be a lot more of you praising it, and then me kind of like saying things I might have not liked about some of that praise.
Yeah, no, listen, that's grand, but we can debate that. We'll thrash it out, and then I'll convince you that you're wrong.
You're usually pretty good at that, and I'm actually really looking forward to hearing what you have to say about it, because you break down a movie. Like, you swayed me on the Jaws 3 and 4 movies, so I'm curious to see, because I already like Temple of Doom a lot, so I want to see if you can get it higher for me.
Oh no, listen, that's good to know. I love being able to articulate things like that, John, and maybe change your thinking on it, and I'm glad to hear that about Jaws 3 and 4. I hope you're going to be watching Jaws the Revenge over Christmas now.
I think I might be. I think that's going to become another one of those ultimate Christmas movies, a lot like Batman Returns, because it's a good movie. It really, in the world of bad sequels, I think people need to go back and see what they had with Jaws the Revenge and realize you're pretty spoiled. You were a little bit more spoiled back then than you thought.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, it's a good kind of, as I said in the last podcast, it's a good kind of in between Christmas, New Year movie.
Yep. And I think that's exactly probably where I'd check it out from now on, because there's not much. That's that little dead area after Christmas. Like, do I put a Christmas movie on? No, but there's a little bit you can do there.
Pour yourself a Bahama Mama.
2 Bahama Mamas, please.
Two Bahama Mamas, please.
That's a good Michael Caine impression.
Cheers. Do you know what? I might actually look into what does a Bahama Mama consist of? And I may try and make a couple of Bahama Mamas and watch Jaws of Revenge over Christmas.
That's a great thing to do. That's not a bad. I think it's rum based, if I'm correct.
Okay, we'll get maybe rum Bacardi, maybe some Bacardi in there.
Yeah, I've had a Bahama Mama. I don't know what's in it, but I've gone to vacation and ordered Bahama Mama. It's delicious.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, I don't know what the hell's in it. It's very good though.
I'm gonna check it out, man. And here, you know what? This is what we need. We need a Jaws the Revenge or Jaws cocktail book.
Then we do need a Jaws cocktail book. You're the guy to write that.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of drinking going on in these movies.
I mean, it's one of the world's greatest pastimes, I would say, is drinking.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, especially for Robert Shaw.
Oh my god, yeah. A little too much for him.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. But anyway, guys, we hope you enjoyed this edition of the Let's Talk podcast with me and David, aka Shamrock Balls. And I think we want to all wish you guys a happy holiday.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, guys, and we'll be seeing you around.
Hey guys, just jumping in here for this week's digital code giveaway. In every single video we do on Friday, guys, I ask you guys 2 digital code giveaway questions. All you gotta do is answer 1 in the comment section. As long as you did that, you come back to this video right here. I put your name on a magic wheel. I spun that wheel 2 times. The 2 names it lands on, they have their choice of the digital codes that you've seen on your screen before you today. And without further ado, let's spin this magic wheel. And there you have it. Congratulations, Jed Eckert and the Destroyer. Both of you guys have won in the past. Jed Eckert is actually one of our channel producers, so congratulations, guys. You know, it is Christmas Eve, so Merry Christmas. Reach out to me. My email address, letstalkentmt@gmail.com. Let me know which one of those digital codes you want. As long as the other winner didn't take it, that digital code is all yours. You can also reach out to me at Facebook, Instagram, the artist formerly known as Twitter, and you can let me know there as well if you don't want to email me. But if you didn't win this week, guys, don't worry about it all. We do this every single week, so make sure you guys come back to this Friday's video, which will be the top 10 4K Blu-rays of 2024, where we will ask you guys next week's digital code giveaway questions. And also, a week from today will be our channel members 4K Blu-ray giveaway, so if you are a channel member under the Friends of the Channel, Producers tier, or Directors tier, I'll put your name on a magic wheel next week, and we'll spin that, and you'll have your choice of a 4K Blu-ray. But guys, that's going to do it here for me on another episode of Let's Talk. I hope you guys enjoyed me and David's breakdown of Batman Returns. It's a fantastic Christmas movie, and it's also just a fantastic Batman movie. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments section, and while you guys are down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We also have channel memberships, like I was saying. But if you got no money to throw away, don't worry about it, guys. We just hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.